very difficult to be a racist police officer, given the fact that you can't monitor who you go and serve with your life. And all of us police officers, whether you black, white, male, female, we all worked as a family. I would die for any one of those police officers, no matter what color they were. And the white police officer in our department would die for me in a minute. And they would defend me harder than anybody else.
I'm excited, really excited to speak with our guest today, Brandon Tatum of the Officer Tatum Show. Officer Tatum is our guest this year at our fall gala, October 6th at Providence Academy. Law enforcement in the Black community, what the media doesn't tell you. Welcome to Fully Charged with Kendall and Sheila Qualls.
So, hey, welcome to our show, Officer Tatum, and thank you for joining us here. Here in Minnesota, you know, we have the backdrop of the George Floyd and the Daunte Wright incidents, and race relations have never been more strained than they are right now in my lifetime. And you know, your show and what you speak about is really an essence of what we're trying to do here at Take Charge, is restoring the two-parent family, helping to get kids access to quality schools, because we can only change the behaviors that we see in our communities through stronger families, better education. What do you say to all of that, and what message are you going to bring here to Minnesota?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for inviting me. It's going to be an amazing event, I tell you that. And I'm 100% in agreement with you that we need to restore the family. The reason that I'm here today and that I've been able to be successful is because I've had a strong, quality, consistent father in my life that have really helped me become a man. And also, education is key. If you are not educated on politics, if you're not educated on, mathematics, you can't read, you're not educated on finances, those things will lead you down a path where you're not going to be successful. And also, it's not just the young people not being educated, it's miseducation is a problem as well. Because if you're miseducated about history, you're miseducated about the legacy and what this country offers you, then I don't think you'll be very successful. So if we can get our young people to be in a solid family, and I know that there's people that are listening that probably they're saying, hey, I'm in a divorce, or I'm a product of a divorce, but that does not mean that your mother or your father cannot have another person be an influential part of your life.
Yeah, well, that actually kind of takes us into our next question, and that is, we need to restore the marriage and families in our community. And I've heard you talk on your show about fatherless homes and how it is just an epidemic in our country. And how is that impacting crime and engagement with law enforcement officers?
It has a tremendous impact. You can look at any of the statistics. Barack Obama spouted the statistics when he was president. You are highly likely to commit suicide, to drop out of school. All of the things that we see are ailments in our society today are exacerbated by not having a father. And I'll say this, I think we've fallen away from God, because if you do not understand your position in the kingdom, then you're not aligning yourself with a quality household to raise your children and also to be a functional adult. It's not just about the children. It's how do adults function if they're not married, if they're not in a stable relationship. And so I think it starts with God, but also it has a bearing on the behavior, especially of young men who are out without guidance, finding refuge or finding leadership in negative things, either as rappers or as young people in the streets that they admire, or it's even individuals that are poor role models to start with. So I think it has an incredible effect on crime in the community if you do not have a stable environment to raise young people that are going to be that's going to add value to society.
This issue is less to do about skin color and more to do about behavioral traits and how our families are destructed.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not a race thing. It's not a color thing. It's unfortunate that it seems to be Black people have adopted this negative, divisive victim culture. And it really has had a negative effect. I mean, when I was a police officer and I patrol areas where there were Black people, there were Hispanic, white people, and there was a common theme. It was an ideology, a culture, a lack of fathers, and a lack of education that created a negative environment that breed violence, domestic violence, sexual assault. All of those things are prevalent when you extract some of the things that we've spoken about before. However, I will say with the advent of gang culture, you know, the when I was growing up, if you were trying to be educated or you wanted to be articulate, they would call you white. They'll say you're trying to be like a white boy, you know, and that culture is not conducive for growth, is not conducive for being a victor, and it's not conducive for you know, accelerated position in our society.
Yeah, you know, we understand, you know, being in the Black community and, you know, trying to do well and, you know, the you know, sort of the ribbing that you get from other people. But, you know, a lot of times when we speak, we have a lot of white people who come to us and say, well, look at these disparities. This is really a problem with racism among law enforcement. So how do you respond to those people?
Well, we have to look at things factually, not emotionally, not viscerally because of visual images that are put out there by the media or whatever the case may be. We have to look at statistical data. I mean, when we look at the stats, you say that Black people make up 13% of the population, and clearly not every Black person is committing crimes. So we have to say a very small fraction of the Black community, a small fraction of America, is committing over half of the murders and half of violent crimes in the country. When you have a number like that, a disproportional a propensity, I don't know if it's propensity or disproportional action towards violence and crime, then you're going to have a disproportional response from police. If you look at the statistical data, and people don't want to look at it, white people get shot twice as much as Black people unarmed. They just don't put it on the social media. They don't put it on the news. White people get shot twice as much as Black people in general, but they don't never put that number out there. They only speak about Black people getting shot. If you look at the statistical data of responses, you look at the population density, Black people are actually patrolled less given the amount of crime that is committed in the cities than white people. If you look at the stats, you put it all together, there's not a racial systemic component to this. It's a simple fact. When you commit crimes and there's violence in your community, police are going to respond to your community more. And one thing about policing, a lot of people do not understand, or maybe they don't want to understand, is that when the call for service comes over the radio, you don't get to choose whether you show up if they're Black or white or green or gay or whatever the case may be. You have to respond to the call for service at hand. And I'll add this point. I believe that officers who patrol in the inner city, who it seems to be in some cases are majority white, I would argue, and I would put my career on the line to say that those are the least racist people in the entire force or in the entire country, because you have to be a person who's open-minded to literally put your life on the line for Black folks. They are the ones that see the young Black men laying in the street dead. They are the ones that have to respond when a kid gets shot in the head through a stray bullet. They're the ones that are responding to rapes. They're the ones that are responding to domestic violence. And in some cases, they're dying in response to some of these cases. I believe with my whole heart that those people are not racist. I think that the media has an agenda, and I think that some people don't want to take accountability for their own actions. If you look at the demographic or the lack of fathers, it's a direct correlation to crime. You look at some of these white communities and you wonder why there's not a lot of crime there. Look at the out of wedlock births. It's a lot less. Look at the education. It's a lot more education and availability to access to wealth and all the other things because of the behavior that are being displayed. So I really believe that it's a lazy excuse to claim that law enforcement is systemically racist, and that's why we see the effects in the Black community.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. And not just a lazy excuse, but a political agenda, because the most consistent variable is having a father in a home. But that, unfortunately, rebuilding the nuclear family is not on the top of the list of their agenda. And the next second layer of variable is skin color. So that's what they play, and they play on emotions. So in regards to what's happening here in our community, I'm sure you've seen this video. This was the toddler that was pounding at a police officer, kicking him and cussing him out. You know, the kid was out there in diapers. You know, what do you say to that? I mean, because literally in our town, the news media did not even show that video at all.
Well, it's a young man. I feel sorry for him, a young kid, because he's going to grow up one day to be a man, and somebody haven't expressed to him the value of respecting authority. And I would argue, and I'd say this again, I'll put my career on the line, that he does not have a father, because a good father would teach his son authority. When I was growing up, I was more afraid of my father than I would ever be of a police officer. It was Mr. Tatum that I was afraid of, and I would treat people with respect because I didn't want my daddy coming after me. And these young people clearly don't have any guidance. Cursing. I mean, this kid had to been 8 or younger. He had to be younger than that. He's cussing at the police officer. 3 years old. So, that was a little kid. The other kids in the background probably were around 8 to 12. But he was hitting the officers, cursing at them. In diapers. These kids didn't have clothes. And I say this all the time. Just because you don't have money don't mean you have to be illiterate. Just because you don't have money don't mean you have to act a fool. Don't mean you have to be trashy. And it's unfortunate that these parents are allowing these things. I didn't see an adult in sight. My daddy would have snatched me up. My mama would have my grandmother would have snatched me up if I was out there behaving in that manner, whether it's a police officer or not. So,
we've talked about it from like your perspective in the community. What about your perspective as a police officer and having to go into these communities?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate and sad because, I'm not going to lie. Inside, I felt some type of way when I would arrest black men that were around my age, that reminded me of my cousins and reminded me of people I grew up with. It was heartbreaking. Although I treat people exactly the same according to the law and according to the way I believe God wanted me to treat them, but on the inside, I felt some type of way. I'll never forget this call. Young black man, his family is just, we go to calls for service to them almost every week. But he had just gotten out of jail on parole. He stole a car. He jumps out of the car. I'm training a young officer. We ended up driving up to him. He's walking up the sidewalk. He has a bag of drugs. I mean, all kinds of drugs in his hand. He throws it behind his back like he's LeBron James or somebody, thinking that he's going to get away. We arrest him. And I never forget this. He started to cave, right? He wanted to snitch on everybody. And he said, I can't do this time. He started to cry. And he mentioned his grandmother. And I could just feel what grandmother is going to feel like when he's going to prison for 25 years now because he violated his parole or his probation. And it was just sad. And I hate to see it because that young man has a future. He could have a different life. He could do something different with himself, but he didn't have the guidance. Grandmother is worried about him, not my father, not my grandfather. And it's heartbreaking every time I go and patrol in these inner cities and I see these young kids that have so much life in them, that have so much potential. And there's times where I wish I could just be their father. I say, look, come to my house for a week and I'm gonna get you lined up. I'm gonna show you how it is to be respected and loved and build you up so you can be a victor and you can conquer this world instead of being a victim. So
yeah, just a little in your last response, you mentioned, kids learning to be victors instead of victims. And actually, that's really the theme of the documentary that we just put out at Take Charge is I am a victor with the word victim crossed out. So I think that's really neat. That's exactly the message that we're giving people. So you talked about, you were a police officer and what it was like from your perspective. What kind of pushback or reception do you get from the Black community when you go in and you have to arrest one of these Black kids?
Well, I have a diverse experience. Sometimes, you go into some parts of the community and they are happy to see you because they want change. They know that something needs to change. They know that their son is out of control and they need him to be held accountable. So sometimes I'm met with reception and gratitude. And especially because I treat everybody with respect and I'm a godly man. So, it comes out when I approach people. Then there's individuals who absolutely hate me. They want no accountability. I'm working for the white man. And I should be ashamed of myself for arresting people who are committing crimes. So I have it's a balanced perspective. And I think people may not understand that there's a lot of people in these communities that are adults, that have been raised in these communities, and these young people are out of control, and they want the police to come in and help. They want the police to be more active. And then you have the elements of society, even in the Black community, that they don't want any help. They want a thug on the street. They want to sell drugs. They don't want to hold people accountable. When somebody goes to jail, they're saying, free my homie so-and-so, and that guy's killed 15 Black people. So I've had both experiences. And, I just wish that more people would wake up and look at this as saying, how do we function within our own community? We need to do some introspection. We need to stop looking at the white man, stop acting as if slavery is still affecting us today. We need to look in the mirror. When I do any speech, and I talk about this on my show, look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror and you fix that person in the mirror, then you can go out and you can help other people. But if you are a damaged person, you're going to do nothing but damage other people when you walk away from that mirror. So I wish that our leaders, or we have true leaders, some of these people are just pimping the community from emotions, but we have true leaders that stand up and say enough is enough. What's our true history? Our true history is excellence. Our true history is perseverance.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us next month. Law enforcement in the Black community, what the media doesn't tell you. Officer Tatum, thank you so much for joining us. We certainly have enjoyed having you here.
God bless you, and I cannot wait to see you guys next month.
Join us October 6th at Providence Academy for Law Enforcement and the Black Community, What the Media Doesn't Tell You, with Officer Brandon Tatum. Well, that's it for this episode of Fully Charged. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify or any other podcast platform. And if you like what you see, as I always say, please give us a 5-star rating while you're there.
And to find out more about Take Charge, go to our website at takechargemn.com and subscribe. And if you like what you hear, hey, please help support us. And because we're driving the message of America, that it works for everyone, regardless of race. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.